Hi there. I'm Heather Hansen. I'm the CEO of Heather Hansen Presents. And after 20 years as a trial attorney, now I work with individuals and businesses on learning the tools to advocate for themselves, their ideas, their wants, their needs, their products, and their businesses. I am so happy to be with you here and to share 3 sips. So, sip number 1. What is the difference between advocating and communicating? So the difference is that when you communicate, you share perspectives, but when you advocate, you change them. So in the courtroom, it was my job to advocate for my clients, and I happened to represent doctors who were sued by their patients. Now, every single member of the jury in every single one of my cases was, at some time or another, a patient. They all saw the world and the case through the patient's perspective. I have never in my 20 years had a doctor on a jury. So none of my jurors see the case, the facts of the case, through a doctor's perspective. My job was to change that. When you're advocating for yourself, for your wants, your needs, or your business, you don't want to just share your perspective. You want to, when necessary, change others' perspectives. And the way that you do that is with the 10 tools of an advocate. Those tools include things like questions, credibility, evidence, but also presentation, which is body language, tone of voice, and energy, and reception, which is good listening skills, not only to the words, but also to the tone of voice and reading body language and reading energy. But when you're able to do that, when you're able to go beyond communicating and start advocating, you are much more likely to win. I often say, facts tell, stories sell, but advocates win. So if you want to win sales, attention, loyalty, or engagement, you want to start advocating. Communication is great when you're talking to a partner or a family member or a friend. But when you're talking to your jury of clients, customers, investors, patients, students, whoever your jury might be, advocating is definitely the way to go. So that's sip number 1. Sip number 2 is about curiosity and how to instill curiosity into your teams. I have 3 ideas for this. The first is model it, ask questions. So many people think that asking questions puts them at a disadvantage or makes them seem less intelligent. But studies show that people see others who ask questions as being more intelligent. In fact, studies of speed dating show that the people who asked the most questions got the most second dates. So if you want your team to ask more questions, show them how it's done. Ask questions at meetings. Ask questions during interactions and listen with all of your body, your eyes, your ears, your heart, your energy. Listen to their responses and then ask more questions. The more you can show that it's okay to not know and to ask questions, the more your team will start stepping into their curiosity as well. So that's my first tip. The second tip is to reward curiosity. When people ask good questions, make a point of noticing it, celebrating it, letting them know that it's a great question and that it's a question that we should study more. Ask more questions about the question. Make sure that people know that you have a culture where questions are appreciated and celebrated and yearned for. And people will step into that power. And then the last tip that I have is actually my favorite tip. When my young associates in my law firm and when I was a partner, a managing partner there, would come to me with questions, I would encourage them to ask all of the questions. But I'd also encourage them to write down what they thought were some potential answers. I find that this helps to instill curiosity more than anything else, because not only does it allow them to ask the questions, but they become curious as to what the answers might be. They innovate and they use their imagination to start to think about what the answers could be. And the great thing about this is that sometimes they come up with the answer that I had. Other times they come up with an answer that's even better than what I would have said. So you get all kinds of benefits from this tip. You get the questions, you get some answers, and you get a new culture of innovation and imagination and curiosity. So that's sip number 2. Now we are on sip number 3. And this sip is about my book. So I wrote the book, The Elegant Warrior: How to Win Life's Trials Without Losing Yourself. And the question is, how does one go about marketing a book? Well, I could talk about this for hours because a lot of it depends on how much money you have to spend, how much of a platform you already have. But the few things that I could tell you across the board are these. Number one, tell as many people as possible that you've written the book. People don't know unless you tell them. And it could be that you're speaking to someone in line at the grocery store who happens to run a huge networking group. If you don't mention that you've written a book, they don't have the benefit of bringing you in to talk about that book and perhaps sell the book. So don't be afraid to share that you've written a book, that it's out there, and that you want to share it. That kind of enthusiasm for your book is definitely contagious. That's number one. Number two is podcasts. So studies show that people who listen to podcasts are more likely to buy books. So I got on as many podcasts as I could and shared as much as I could from the book to allow people to understand what the book was all about and how it could apply to their lives. The book is about stories from the courtroom and how they apply to everyone's lives. And so I shared on podcasts for people in technology, people in healthcare, people in education, women's groups, comedy podcasts, anyone pretty much that asked, I would hop on that podcast. It is a easy enough thing to do, and it can sometimes have huge rewards. And then the third thing is a little bit different. And I wouldn't have known about this if it weren't for my virtual assistant. My virtual assistant recommended that I send the book out to Publishers Weekly to see whether or not they would be willing to review it. They don't choose every book to review, and the review isn't guaranteed to be good. But in my case, the review was fabulous. They called it a template for achieving personal and career success. That review allowed me to lead with that when I would reach out to some podcasts or to some television stations to do some appearances about the book. And it was really a great entree into doing some things that may have otherwise said no. So those are my three sips. The little extra tiny sip that I would add for you is that I am now moving from New York City to Durham, Carolina. I am in the midst of this pandemic writing my second book, and I am growing my coaching business by leaps and bounds because so many of us are going through so many changes during this time. Three sips is a great way to educate yourself as to things that you could be doing and to start dreaming a little bit bigger. So I hope that you do as I have and try to use this time as an opportunity to make changes, to enjoy some of the opportunity that you have to have different types of time and use it differently, and keep on sipping. Cheers. Thanks for having me.